You're listening to the Adventuring Party for the 5th week of July 2024. This week, all people are created equal, right? Well, maybe not so for NPCs and RPGs. The Adventuring Party, discussing tabletop and related gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Dave.
And I'm Eoin.
So, Owen, how do you think NPCs, how should they come about?
Well, when a GM and a scenario love each other very much, they need some bit players. But more to the point, I assume you're asking about the mechanical underpinning of what makes an NPC, rather than the insult NPC, which is occasionally tossed around on social media.
Yes, the former.
Gotcha. So, what is an NPC? An NPC is a non-player character. So, it is not often required to be able to handle every situation like a PC does. That they often appear, strut their little stuff on the stage, and then shuffle off. Many of these characters have a lifespan of 5 minutes. Literally in the case of those who are meant to be used hostilely against PCs.
I believe I can't remember the exact rule book, but there is a line about, this NPC is going to have all the abilities they need for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Which might just be 5 minutes. Listen, every NPC can and should be written as if you will be taking them back off the board 2 minutes after putting them down.
Yep, surprise rounds are a thing.
Yeah, don't get upset when that happens. But we're talking about like how you build an NPC. Like, how do systems handle the differences?
Some systems have no differences.
Yeah, some systems are like, you know what? We'll just come up with one system for building a character, and the players and the bad guys and allies and enemies can all use the same system. How does that work out usually?
I think it makes NPCs a bit more understandable, for better or worse.
It does. There's a universally applicable thing there where it's like, okay, well, this guy's strength 18, I'm strength 16. I guess he's stronger than me.
Yep, the 3rd edition D&D Pathfinder 1st edition, you build your henchmen, use it, or your companions with PC rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And classically, like 3rd edition and 3.5 edition D&D kind of functioned as this weird physics simulator where they were like, this is the rules the world works on, and these rules are universally applicable between player characters and non-player characters and kind of everything. And yeah, I mean, good and bad as a result.
Yeah, well, the same breakable things apply to PC and NPC alike.
Yeah, pretty much. And there were things that... there was detail on a PC's sheet that an NPC sheet often didn't need. You got an awful lot of skill points in 3rd edition D&D, and handing them all out to an NPC was maybe a little overkill, but people would do it anyway.
Yeah, it could be handy for a GM to have an idea of this character actually knows something about knowledge, religion. It comes up.
It does. I remember a friend of the show, Conrad Kinch, was designing characters and was basically writing an RPG, had the RPG written, and then had to start up a bunch of characters for D&D, and kind of thought, okay, well, this will take about 20 minutes. And I started laughing when he said that in the room, and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, get on with it then. And he came back to me half an hour later going, "Can you please help?" And I went, "Yeah, no problem, man." There's a lot of building on a character like that. Oh, a lot of fiddling with 3.5, certainly. And what probably led to the big change in 4th Ed, where suddenly NPCs and PCs were not built on the same engine. They didn't have levels anymore, for example, the bad guys.
Yeah, they had, they had their type ones that were snipers or melee or what have you.
Absolutely. Like, there's minions as well, importantly.
Oh, yeah, with one hit point apiece.
These guys have 1 hit point. I was like, what? They die so easily? Yes, that's the point. You just have to hit them once and they're dead. which was kind of an idea that was not first entered the thing, but have been popularized in recent time by Savage Worlds, where they had kind of an idea that, okay, look, a character is either in the fight, fully capable, possibly ruined, but be fully capable, or they're shaken, or they're dead. And there's not a lot else in that window. Like, you're either able to do stuff, you're not able to do stuff, but you might get a chance to do stuff again, and you won't get a chance to do stuff again. Which is good if you're handling large numbers of bad guys. Because one of the things is, if you have, we've got, let's have a fight with 30 guys in it. If they a bunch of 1 hit point, that fight is a lot easier to manage.
Yeah. I know. I remember some people were getting irked about high level minions, as in that, say, in other editions of D&D would have had loads of hit points. But it did kind of make sense, because at high levels, well, PCs should be still able to cut through at that point the relative chaff.
Yeah. Look, the chaff is there to be chaff. You knocked off the field very quickly. Pawn's going first. And that was one of the big differences, actually, and one of the controversies in Fourth Ed, that there were very powerful bad guys, and that they were there were bad guys suitable for mid-20s level PCs, but they only had 1 hit point. And we were like, how does this work? And I was like, it's just, you don't fight them unless you're mid-20s. These guys don't rampage through small towns, just, killing everybody until someone rolls a 20 and kills one. They have 1 hit point, sure, but they have to be hit by an attack to be killed. And it was an abstraction, and I think that abstraction, some people didn't like it at all. They did not take to it. And you're going to get into this debate about realism in RPGs versus speed of play and ease of play. And minions are great for speed of play and ease of play, and they're terrible for the realism people, who get very irritated by the existence of stuff like minions, despite minions being very handy to have as an option.
I'd argue that it's not necessarily unrealistic. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing in combat, you're probably going to get cut down pretty quickly.
Yeah, but people don't think that. People think a lot of weird things. Some people get very annoyed about meta currencies, not like hit points, and they said, "Oh no, the hit points is not a meta currency." I said, "It absolutely is. It doesn't. It does not replicate human injury in any way."
Like, all gaming is an abstraction to some
Absolutely.
degree. But digressing slightly, I know an example that came to mind actually was Cities Without Number, relatively new cyberpunk take by the productive Mr. Crawford, and so you can have NPCs with the same sort of cyber gear as PC, similar stats, but they don't necessarily have the same activation costs for their cyberware, because, well, they're soon to have enough to get them through the fight with the PCs. It's not worded exactly like that, but the implication is pretty clear.
Yeah. The thing is that, especially games like that, where there's like a kind of a long-term cost on some powers, that doesn't matter to NPCs. Yeah, technically, but most of the time they're being put on the page, like their life cycle is shockingly short.
I think it would depend a lot on, as in, if they're being written up as a character who exists in a world, or as a character who exists for this fight to be mulched through, because those are not quite. Those are different rationales for why you're building this character and how. Because it makes sense, like, say, for a character living in a cyberpunk world, it makes sense that, might decorate my cyber arm or whatever. Basically, bronze tattoos, on it. Whereas this means nothing for combat ability. Why should this character? Why would I do that?
Well, I mean, players do silly things just because they look cool as well. But for some stuff, like, it's like, combat drugs. There's a chance of messing yourself up in one of these. That often is not super relevant to an NPC. It's like, he will probably die, in 50 years' time, I suppose, a bit early.
Well, you could also argue that if the NPC knows that what a party is like, and let's face it, a lot of parties Well, there's a lot of parties who don't take prisoners, let's just say.
Yeah.
So, well, might as well use these heavy-duty combat drugs and amp my cyberware up to the max because, well, I'm probably not getting out of it, if I don't.
Yeah. Look, players kill a lot of NPCs. Even the nice ones. Even the nice players kill a lot of NPCs. But that's the thing. I think the crux of it is it greatly enhances playability at a very definite cost of a little less realism if you use a different, more suitable chassis to build NPCs because they need less. Like, for example, there's usually, in some systems, there's a rake of skills. And sometimes those skills are a little bit specialized, lore pasta or profession baker. And they're probably not going to come up for an NPC. So, do they really need those skills? Do you need to enumerate all the many skills they should potentially have? Because I play games with like a skill list that runs to 50 skills. Do they need it?
If you're in a system where the NPCs can do stuff outside of like one combat, say something like maybe Pendragon or like another domain, game, game with domain, a domain game, the NPC stats might actually matter quite a bit because how well are they managing their estate, or perhaps more importantly, how are they managing the PC's estate while the PC is off gallivanting somewhere?
Yeah. And that's valuable, particularly for a game like Pendragon, where you probably have a lot of followers, right? You may have a castle. You may have.
Yeah, like you have a castle, you have lands.
They must be administrated,
Hmm.
I'm sure you can leave your wife to do all the work, but still.
I'm sure that will go down great.
Yeah. Honey, I'm off crusading again. You're not even going to the Holy Land. You're just going to the Wales. Look. Oh my God. Arthur asked me to. Arthur's always asking me to do stuff.
Oh dear.
But here's another thing that occasionally crops up, right? Some systems are very much scaled around humans and often human level capabilities. So if you look at a lot of percentile system, they kind of work okay at a level of here's a human, and under this system you can have a very strong human or a very weak human.
Sure.
But it's a percentile system. And then you look at something like a giant or a dragon, and you may find that quite difficult to scale in a percentile system.
Yeah. I suppose the example that comes to mind for me is Deathwatch, a 40k RPG where the percentile system that works quite well for Dark Heresy, with basically normal people, kind of breaks for the power armor, unnatural strengthed, hugely statted superhuman warriors.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least they tried to go, okay, well, what is this? Okay, if a tough guy is 40 toughness and a toughness bonus of 4, what does a Space Marine have? Do they have toughness bonus 80? And their solution was to go unnatural toughness, where it didn't trivialize and make all this, giving the Space Marines kind of toughness stats in the 160s. They just went, no, they can be like 60 toughness and they have unnatural toughness. So they doubled their toughness bonus against damage. And that accounts for them being much, much, much tougher. And that was a decent solution. But it is a problem to go, okay, this guy, it's a dragon, so he makes a strength test. Is that just an auto win? And you're kind of like, yeah, it pretty much would be in real life. But at the same time, should it still be hard for them to lift up something? Or not? It's not easy.
Yeah, like that's fundamental game design considerations there. Like, as far as I could see, like.
Yeah, but isn't it easier sometimes to go, hang on, let's just take these stats that have to look like be on the same scale of a player's stats, and can we come up with something different? A different scale or a different way to resolve this? You roll a dice, the dragon succeeds on strength tests and anything but whatever. And just it's not 95% skill, it just succeeds in anything but a thing. If you're testing against it, it's this difficulty to test against it.
Yeah, no, there are systems where the NPC stats are very stripped down, as in stuff like just attack values and health and maybe defense.
It's a big issue in stuff like Cthulhu, where there's a whole lot of fighting human scale stuff, grand, But there are big Gribblies as well, and they are given stats. So it's often like, oh, what?
Yeah, I mean, Cthulhu has health, does he?
He does, yeah. He has hit points. They're like, he regenerates pretty quickly, but he does have hit points. He has armor. And he's very hard to hurt, and if you do hurt him, he regenerates very quickly, so... And he can, crush D3 investigators around with flabby claws. Or they can reach down and pluck 1d4 investigators around up to their doom by reaching out his tentacles, But he does have stats. He has stats. But I mean, I think that's another aspect to it when your system doesn't calibrate or handle well because it's tightly balanced a kind of a higher level or out of human scale character. It's sometimes useful to go, okay, how can I make this character simple to run? Like for example, let's say I've got a 700-year-old elf in this system, which is kind of you're meant to pick up skills. Like do elves learn super slow, or should this guy just have hundreds of skills, or is there a way to just have a broader band skill to give NPCs instead? That they have a skill for the stuff they're a role for the stuff they're good at, and a role for the stuff they have no idea about, and that's it. They don't need to have 60 different skills all carefully enumerated.
Especially for convention games and one-offs, I've seen character sheets that boil it down to, like, even where I know that the base game has way more skills or abilities and whatnot, like boiling it down to like 2 or 3 things that you can roll off the character sheet, which I think makes sense, like scaling it to the sort of game you're running.
You want your game to run relatively simple, and one of the factors is, okay, I can't remember all the skills. We'll just give him this one where he has this for the stuff he's good at and this for the stuff that he will be bad at. And that's one of the other factors. Players only have to learn one set of special rules.
Mm.
Do the GMs need to learn all of the set of special rules?
That's a fair question.
Often, like, for example, I think one of the most critiqued aspects of 5th Ed's GM experience is having to know all the spells for NPC stat blocks because all their special abilities are given by spells.
Yeah, it's not listed in the monster manual entries or adventure entries.
No. You got to go and look in the PHP, or you got to go look up it online. What does this spell do? Now, you may remember what Fireball does, but there are other spells which you will not. You'll be just like, what does this one do?
I mean, with the internet, it does become easier to look this stuff up, or with PDFs it becomes easier, but there's still a lot to work through. Like if you're having to search each time for
It really
spells,
is.
that's going to get time consuming.
It really is. It's like, for a lot of the time, the spell is this just does damage, right? Could this not just be, blast 12d6 instead of fireball heightened to level 4? You could just have this be a blast that just does damage, right? Rather than say, yeah, look at the rules for fireball.
Bunch of OSR games go either way as well. Like the NPCs are built like PCs. Others, well, the NPCs have their own weird abilities that have
Yeah.
nothing to do with PC abilities.
That's it, right? That you can handle that differently if you're prepared to go, well, we'll use a different system for the NPCs where maybe there's less remembering, maybe they can be simpler, maybe they can have collapse down stats or collapse down abilities to handle this stuff.
Collapse down abilities or something slightly different. For example, Outcast Silver Raiders, it points out very early in the player's book that warriors are not just soldiers. They have their own set of abilities that normal soldiers do not have. Rogues are not just common thieves, and sorcerers, well, they're not really like anyone else. Even other mages are going to use different sorts of spells, like have rituals that nobody's ever seen, kind of thing. Yeah, it actually does build in the point that the PCs are different to the rest of the world.
I mean, I think the table stuff occasionally to flavor up NPCs a bit is good, and it can make them a little more mysterious in some ways, because often the problem is if they're using a PC mechanic, a player, if they're scrupulously well read, can often identify a lot about an NPC from the abilities or capabilities it displays. Whereas if they're working off something a bit more bespoke and unique, it's a lot more difficult to go, he's a sorcerer. He just cast this spell with dangerous sorcery attached to it. That's why it did that much damage. Whereas, if they're going, this one Blast of Ice. It did 76 damage. Now I don't know what to think. If that did 66 damage next turn, the hell? What's going on here? What's going on here? I don't understand how this works. And that's good. If someone actually can look under the hood at a glance, they can often figure out, oh, it's just this. If it's this, that means that, and I can figure out some stuff as a result of that one,
Any other particularly interesting examples come to mind?
Savage Worlds does mooks very, very well by using extras who are either fine or dead, a bit like having 1 hit point, but there's a bit more granularity on them. Any hit isn't enough to kill them. It needs to be a decent hit, because a decent hit will just, or a crappy hit will leave them unharmed. A decent hit will take them out or stun them, making them easier to take out. That's nice as big. It's a little more variable than 1 hit point ones, because the 1 hit point minion thing, successful attack, you then have to add a caveat that, they don't take AoE damage, they don't take splash damage unless it would hit them, to kind of get away from, it's too easy to spam something to take these guys out. You need to actually connect to get rid of them, and that's kind of good. I mean, I think detail based on how long they're going to stay alive in some ways is a good thing, and making them easier to run for GMs is good. If you look at the way 4th Ed and Pathfinder 2nd Edition handled monsters, they kind of went, okay, we're going to give you, the saves, the defenses, the senses, and we might give you the stats if you really want to know the stats, and they're there. And they have a few skills, if those skills would be relevant to them. And then instead of having the same dizzying array of attack options a player might have an equipment list, they just have this is their attack. And they have a special ability that lets them do this. And you make them easier for a GM to run. If you've ever looked at Pathfinder 2nd Edition monsters, they're really easy to run. A few of them are very complex, but most of them are really simple. And they'll have a trick, and it'll be like, okay, this is a leopard. For 1 action, it can stride and make a claw attack. For a 2nd action, it can grapple anyone that hits with its claw this turn. And for a third action, it can make 2 claw attacks or 2 rake attacks, basically. And that's its thing. So its thing is, okay, I spend an action, I move up and attack. I spend an action to grab. I spend an action to rake. Oh, done. And that's the way the NPC runs. So the GM goes, okay, cool. This is really simple to work with. Now you can occasionally have very powerful creatures that are like that, but a lot of the time they're kind of simple. Now Pathfinder 2nd ones, because they have a lot of their wizards will still cast spells. Easy to be able to look up spells, but for some stuff it's just like, yep, just use this, and use this, and it's relatively straightforward. That's one of the things VTTs are great for, because they just click on the spell and the spell expands, and then there's the spell. I don't have to think of it.
That is making even some somewhat more detailed systems much more playable, particularly for GMs.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think it's using a different system for it is mostly to make GM's life easier, either in terms of prep or running or remembering stuff. And otherwise, players would be perfectly happy. Bad guys ran to exactly the same rules as them, or at least most of the same rules, and maybe some of the stuff that really helps PCs out was gently excised.
Oh, dear listeners, if you have any notions about interesting ways of statting up NPCs in systems, or in why you might do things one way or another, feel free to prod us on social media or join our Discord. But for now, this party of PCs is over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike of version 3 license.